I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Thank you for beginning your day with us. We're going to start this hour with the latest on the deadly hantavirus outbreak. This morning, 18 of the passengers who were on board that cruise ship, they are back here in the U.S. and being monitored at medical centers in Nebraska and Atlanta. Health officials said one of the people in Atlanta is showing mild symptoms and one of the people in Nebraska has tested positive.
Now, we're told those two passengers traveled in biocontainment units on a plane. They're now being monitored. Overseas, medical crews helped evacuate dozens of other passengers who were still left on that boat. Now, the ship, working with a limited crew, is heading back to the Netherlands, where it will be disinfected. NBC News international correspondent Raf Sanchez has been following the story, joins us now with the latest. Raf, good morning. So what do we know about these two Americans, the one with the mild symptoms, the other who tested mildly positive? I mean, what does that even mean?
Joe, Savannah, good morning. Yeah, so testing mildly positive, it basically means exactly what it sounds like. This is a patient who has tested positive, but they are just over the threshold for that positive test. That can indicate a number of things. It could be a very mild infection. It could potentially be the early stages of an infection. This is somebody who is in Nebraska. They are being kept in medical isolation. So that means not only away from the other passengers from that ship, but they are actually having very limited contact with medical personnel. But the word from Nebraska right now is that they are not showing symptoms, so they will be kept under observation. The other person who is showing some mild symptoms is in Atlanta, along with their partner, just two of them in that Atlanta facility. We saw them being taken by wheelchair into Emory University yesterday. Their symptoms are mild. We are waiting now for official confirmation whether or not that is hantavirus. Guys.
And then tell us about the others, Raf, who are quarantining with no symptoms, no positive test at this point, but who were on that ship. How long will they be held, and what are their everyday lives going to look like during this time?
Yeah, so as we know, guys, the incubation period for hantavirus is 6 weeks. So it's very possible you have the virus, you're infected with it, you're not showing any symptoms. The approach being taken in the United States is people are starting off in these two centers in Nebraska and in Atlanta. And then after that, they are going to be free, assuming they don't test positive, they aren't showing symptoms, to return to their own homes. They will be expected to remain quarantining there, but they will be kept under the observation of local state health officials. Now, that is quite a different approach to what we are seeing over here in Europe. In both Spain and France, people who came off that ship are facing a mandatory 42-day quarantine in government health facilities. The goal there is to make absolutely sure that there is minimal chance of them spreading it to anyone else. The folks in these facilities, they are being kept in individual rooms, daily medical checks. They're having food delivered to them, obviously. They actually have Pelotons in their rooms so they can do exercise there. So in some ways, it's a little bit of a reminder of COVID and the quarantining people had sometimes to do after coming off international flights.
Which was also a very good time for Peloton as well, we should know. So obviously, we're laser focused on the American cases here, but you mentioned other countries. Anything we know about passengers in other countries? Any new cases reported?
Yeah, so all 150 people off the ship. They came off in Tenerife now. They've been scattered either to their home countries or to third countries. We do have a little bit of news about a British citizen who was being treated in South Africa. That was one of the first confirmed cases. He appears to be doing better, which is encouraging. There is also, though, guys, a French woman who was returned to France. She's in hospital there. She is in intensive care right now. The French Prime Minister is saying she is in a stable condition. That is obviously concerning, though. 3 confirmed deaths from the hantavirus so far. Hopefully, no more to come. Guys.
Raf, so all the passengers are now off the ship itself, along with its crew, heading back to the Netherlands. What happens next for this boat?
Yeah, so it's sailing into the port of Rotterdam. We expect that it's going to get there Sunday evening, so basically a week after it unloaded the passengers in Tenerife. Rotterdam is a port that has a lot of experience of dealing with ships where there has been an outbreak of an infection. We saw a cruise ship where there was a pretty serious norovirus outbreak come into Rotterdam. And basically, they have protocols in place for the deepest of deep cleaning. So disinfecting communal areas, going through cleaning individual cabins. You have some 25 crew members who are still on the ship, as well as a doctor and a nurse who are monitoring them. Guys.
Right. Raph Sanchez. Raph, thank you so much.
Well, as we just discussed there with Raph, there is now a big focus on what those quarantine measures will look like for the Americans back in the U.S. and how long they will last.
NBC News national correspondent Aaron Gilchrist takes a look at how health officials are approaching the challenge.
18 Americans quarantining inside special medical facilities in Omaha and Atlanta. But officials have not said how long they'll stay.
They actually can move home and continue their quarantine there, and then the tracking will be turned over to the state and local health departments.
But in Spain, passengers will be forced to quarantine for 42 days, clearing the hantavirus's incubation period, which would ensure there is no infection. And France says it will isolate its passengers for 42 days. Dr. Ashish Jha oversaw the COVID response for the Biden administration.
I think the safest way to do that is what, for instance, Spain is doing. Spain is putting all of the people who came off the ship on a 6-week quarantine.
His reasoning? This disease is still relatively unstudied.
At least a few people contracted it without that sort of prolonged close exposure that we've always assumed.
As of now, the American passengers, if not showing any symptoms, will be allowed to go home and monitor their symptoms themselves.
What do you say to people who might have concern about that reality?
Well, they're not going back to their normal lives. They're still going to be tracked for 42 days.
Jody Guest is an epidemiologist at Emory University and not connected to the care of the cruise passengers there.
The state and local health departments will do the monitoring. There's certainly going to be this continual contact tracing and surveillance of the symptoms.
Officials insist the public is safe, but admit there are no absolute certainties.
There are no guarantees in life. We're putting as many measures in place as possible to ensure that people are safe and healthy.
Now, federal health officials have started coordinating already with state and local health departments for what happens next when these people who are asymptomatic do return to their home states. Some of the plans do vary, but we know at the very least states are preparing to monitor these passengers when they return home, making sure they're doing daily checks for symptoms in some cases, and making sure that people isolate if they do start to display symptoms of hantavirus. Back to you.
All right. Aaron, thank you. President Trump set to leave later today for a high-stakes summit in Beijing with Chinese President Xi Jinping.
It will be President Trump's second state visit to China as commander-in-chief and the first of this term. The two leaders are expected to discuss the ongoing war with Iran as well as the future of Taiwan. President Trump discussed his relationship yesterday with the Chinese leader ahead of this visit.
You know, I've gotten along well, other than with COVID. I was just not accepting of what happened with COVID. But other than that, he's a great gentleman. I find him to be an amazing man. He loves his country, I can tell you that. President Xi, I look forward to being there. And if he felt anything, we wouldn't be doing it.
NBC News international correspondent Janice Mackey-Frayer joins us now from Beijing with a preview. Janice, good morning. Of course, they'll discuss the war with Iran. After all, China is the world's largest buyer of Iranian oil, and President Trump had previously suggested the war would end before his visit to China. Clearly, that's not the case, so walk us through what we can expect during this visit.
Well, Joe, in that sense, the summit now looks much more like crisis management than a diplomatic breakthrough. Remember, it was postponed because of the Iran war, and it's proceeding now, even though the war remains unresolved. President Trump will be looking to leverage China's influence as the world's largest buyer of Iranian oil and a major economic player across the Gulf. Beijing does have leverage with Tehran, but so far it's taken a largely hands-off approach when it comes to the war. For Xi Jinping, his core priority in this is stability. He wants to prevent a wider conflict that could disrupt energy supplies and shipping routes. Behind closed doors, the talks are likely to focus on oil markets, sanctions, and whether China is willing to quietly pressure Iran to avoid escalation. But Xi is also going to be careful to not appear too aligned with Washington. Politically, both leaders want to project strength. So even without a major agreement on this, the symbolism and the tone of this meeting will matter.
Janice, the United States and China were locked in this tug of war when it came to trade and tariffs back when President Trump began his second term last year, and then they reached that truce when they met last October. Do you think we could potentially see some sort of longer-term deal on the table during this visit?
Well, both sides want stability, but a true long-term deal is still unlikely because the relationship now is no longer just about tariffs. The rivalry touches on technology, national security, supply chains, Taiwan. A more realistic outcome may not be some sweeping grand bargain, but an effort at least to manage the tensions and to avoid escalation. Things like extending these tariff pauses, increasing trade, reopening certain communication channels. Ultimately, both sides are looking for a more predictable relationship. Savannah, it's also worth noting that Chinese officials went to South Korea in the last couple of days to meet with U.S. commerce officials who are visiting there. And that's a sign that the two sides are maybe still trying to finalize some deliverables for Presidents Trump and Xi to agree on. Savannah?
Janice, an interesting angle here. There are a lot of CEOs of major companies who are expected to travel with the U.S. delegation to China. Tell us who is set to take part in the trip and just what we can expect with that.
Well, it's a very high-powered business delegation that's being unveiled. People like Elon Musk, Tim Cook, executives from Boeing, BlackRock, Meta, Qualcomm. There's some major Wall Street firms. The message seems to be that even with geopolitical rivalry, business ties between the U.S. and China are still extensive and important. And what's interesting with this delegation is that it's going to be less about deal-making and more about access and influence. A lot of these companies are trying to protect their supply chains, expand here in China, or get regulatory approvals. These are all things that have been related to or delayed by trade tensions. Joe and Savannah.
All right, Janice, thank you so much.
For more on this state visit, let's bring in Mark Stewart. He's a journalist who recently wrapped up a 2-year assignment covering China based in Beijing. Mark, good morning. Thank you very much for being with us. So the ongoing war in Iran, of course, expected to be a main focal point here of this trip. His relationship with the Chinese president has been rocky at times, but it's remained civil. We just played him speaking about Xi Jinping. What will you be looking for as this state visit gets underway soon?
Well, I remember I was in Beijing when whispers of this meeting first surfaced, and the feeling was in order for it to take place, there would have to be some kind of announcement. And I think the fact that, as Janice mentioned, all of these CEOs are coming with President Trump to China does signal that we will see some kind of economic announcements. That could mean more commercial aircraft purchases. It could mean perhaps more purchase of U.S. agriculture products like soybeans. So I think there's going to be some room for a little bit of muted celebration, for lack of better words. I think there's also some room for some very tense moments. I think we're going to see China really press the United States to take a hands-off approach when it comes to Taiwan and Chinese sovereignty. This is happening at a very critical time for China. It's really trying to portray itself as almost the leader of a new world order, this alternative to the West. We have seen in recent months not just this U.S. presidential visit, but we have seen the Prime Minister of India, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. I was in China when there was the big military parade, when Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un from North Korea was all in Tiananmen Square. These are all very symbolic moves for China to show the world that it's a big force. And with the arrival of President Trump, it only adds to that narrative, Joe and Savannah.
Mark, I want to ask you more about Taiwan, which you mentioned in the future of Taiwan. We know just last week, China's top diplomat was speaking with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, saying he hopes the U.S. would make, quote, the right choices when it comes to the self-ruled nation. What is the message China wants to send to the U.S. about Taiwan during this week's meetings?
The message that China wants to send to the U.S. is for the U.S. to really mind its own business. China feels that Taiwan is its own territory. It's part of this idea of one China, that China is going to dictate what happens beyond the mainland to Taiwan. Perhaps we will see China really press the U.S. to say it's going to end arms sales, which has been a tradition for many years. Perhaps we'll see China push the U.S. to stop allowing Taiwanese diplomats to pass through the United States. There has been some conversation that perhaps China would even pressure the United States by offering incentives, perhaps economic or business incentives, if it takes a firm stance toward this Taiwan question. I should point out that this Taiwan issue is often referred to as a red line issue. China is not going to budge, and it's putting a big burden on the United States.
Mark, what do we think the state of U.S.-China relations and the state of the relationship between Trump and Xi Jinping is from Beijing's perspective?
Well, I think that it thinks that it's frosty. I remember I was talking to the former U.S. ambassador just a few months ago, and he was talking about how the fact that this is an adversarial relationship. Yes, it is true that Xi Jinping and President Trump have had some good moments together. They shared chocolate cake together at Mar-a-Lago back in 2017. But this relationship can change very quickly. Once there were concerns about how China was handling COVID, once there were concerns about how China was handling some of these trade issues in the first Trump presidency, we saw things get very tense. So I think that Beijing is going to take a very guarded approach. It's interesting. I was looking at some of the reporting from Chinese state media, which is very much the government's messenger service. A lot of talk about a win-win situation, about diplomatic cooperation. That's the narrative that Beijing wants to portray publicly, but I think it's also very aware that things can shift very quickly.
All right, Mark Stewart, thank you so much for joining us and lending us your expertise. And a programming note here, Nightly News and top story anchor Tom Yamas is in Beijing for this high-stakes summit. He'll be bringing us coverage all week.
Hopes for a peace deal between the U.S. and Iran appear to be diminishing. President Trump said on Monday that the ceasefire was on life support and called Iran's counterproposal, quote, garbage. The standoff over an agreement to end the war and reopen the critical Strait of Hormuz is pushing oil prices up again today. And with gas prices elevated at the pumps, the president is considering pausing the federal gas tax. NBC News chief Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles has the latest.
President Trump looking to reduce the pain at the pump by suspending the federal gas tax.
Mr. President, are you going to suspend the federal gas tax?
Yeah, I'm going to reduce until let me tell you, as soon as this is over with Iran, as soon as it's over, you're going to see gasoline and oil drop like a rock.
That move would require an act of Congress and would reduce prices by about 18 cents a gallon. All as President Trump is warning the fragile ceasefire with Iran is on the verge of collapse.
I would say it's one of the weakest right now. It's on life support.
Slamming Iran's latest response, which would delay any negotiations over its nuclear program as, quote, garbage.
Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, and they won't have a nuclear weapon, and they didn't want to go that far. They think that, well, I'll get tired of this, or I'll get bored, or I'll have some pressure, but there's no pressure. There's no pressure at all. We're going to have a complete victory.
And on Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium?
We talked about it, and they said, you'll have to take it out because we don't have the capability of doing it.
So, sir, are you saying that the Iranians have agreed to allow the removal of all their enriched uranium?
Yeah. And well, they did it 2 days ago. They didn't, okay? They did 2 days ago. They said, you're going to have to take it. We were going to go with them, but they changed their mind because they didn't put it in the paper.
Experts say even 1 month without the gas tax would cost the Highway Transportation Fund, which pays for improvements to roads and highways across the country, $3.5 billion.
All right, Ryan, thank you.
Well, President Trump voicing support for suspending the federal gas tax. Momentum is now starting to build among Republicans in Congress.
Just yesterday, GOP Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri introduced a bill that would pause the tax. As we mentioned, that would save drivers about 18 cents a gallon. That pause would last for 90 days, and the president could extend the suspension for 90 more days if he felt it was necessary.
NBC News senior national political reporter Sahil Kapoor joins us now with more on this. Sahil, good morning. So this legislation needs to pick up at least 7 Democratic votes in order to overcome a filibuster in the Senate. I mean, what's the appetite like here for pausing this federal gas tax?
Well, Savannah, I'd say this is very much a live ball at this time. 2 things are certainly true. The first is President Trump will need Congress to get this done. Taxing power is firmly in the hands of Congress, and he'll face a world of legal trouble if he tries to go around them and do this on his own. The second thing is this will take a real negotiation with Democrats at minimum of the sort that Trump is typically reluctant to engage in, some real compromises to get Democrats on board. Remember, it was just a few years ago that President Biden proposed suspending the gas tax, and he got a firm no from Republicans, and he got a chilly reception from Democrats. Some of the Democrats who do support suspending a gas tax, including Brendan Boyle, the top Democrat on the House Budget Committee, say he's still in favor of it, but that if Trump is serious, he'll have to end the war in Iran. And he's proposing a bill that would offset the revenue by ending taxpayer subsidies and funding for big oil and gas companies. And just a few years ago, again, it was Senate Majority Leader John Thune, today the Majority Leader, I should say, who called it a gimmick, called it a Band-Aid, called it dead on arrival. Now, you would expect many Republicans to flip and be supportive now that Donald Trump wants it to happen, but it's not going to be automatic. It's not going to be unanimous. So the first question is, can he even get enough Republicans?
Sahil, let's turn now and talk about the battle over redistricting in Virginia. That's now going to head to the U.S. Supreme Court. We know Virginia Democrats are asking the justices to essentially overturn Friday's state Supreme Court decision, which blocked that new voter-approved congressional map from taking effect. It would have given Democrats a chance to net up to 4 new seats in the House. Now, the Supreme Court doesn't have jurisdiction over how states run their elections. So talk about why Virginia Democrats are taking this to the justices and what they're arguing.
I think it's fair to see this as a last-ditch option by Virginia Democrats. They want to exhaust every legal avenue before they let this go. They're essentially asking the Supreme Court to put on hold that Virginia Supreme Court ruling 4-3 through the midterm election so they can use this House map in 2026. There are 2 seats that Democrats would be all but guaranteed to pick up, and there are another 2 that they might pick up anyway because they're competitive, but they would still move in the direction. So there's a lot at stake here. The argument that Democrats are making is that the Virginia Supreme Court ruling runs afoul of federal law regarding how elections are defined and that it usurps the authority of the state legislature. They also argue that the Virginia Supreme Court overrode the will of the people who had it in front of them in a referendum and voted to approve the map, guys.
Sahil, before we let you go, Republicans are hoping to send their budget reconciliation package to the Senate floor next week. They want to focus on the tens of billions in new funding for immigration enforcement that is included. But something else is getting attention, this addition of $1 billion in taxpayer funds that would go towards security upgrades for that new White House ballroom we've heard quite a bit about. How big of a problem is that for Republicans?
It's a significant problem because this is the issue that Democrats have decided to lean in on heavily. They are planning to message this as ballroom Republicans trying to make the working class pay a price for what they call a vanity project by President Trump. The ballroom, remember, didn't even poll well before the issue of taxpayer money was introduced to pay for it. President Trump had said for many months that it would be done entirely by private funding. A Washington Post survey found 2-to-1 opposition to it. What Democrats are going to do is offer amendments to strip out the money and try to use it to put vulnerable Senate Republicans in a precarious position, having to vote with Trump if they choose to, or potentially jeopardize the entire bill. Take a listen to what some senators had to say.
Donald Trump promises it will never cost the taxpayers a single penny, and the Republicans just slip it in to a bill that's all about ICE funding. I don't know if they thought we wouldn't notice, or that they are just that cynical and think the American people won't notice.
The president was raising the money for the ballroom, and now there's security aspects to it. You know, then you had the attempted, or the shooting, actual shooting, at the White House dinner, and I think that just raised the concern that there does need to be more security.
So first off, there has been an attempt to conflate the White House Correspondents' Dinner shooting with the ballroom. I'll note that the Correspondents' Dinner is a private event hosted by journalists. It's not a White House event. And even if the ballroom existed, it's highly unlikely to take place at the White House to begin with. Now, finally, guys, this is a $70 billion package that funds ICE and Border Patrol. Republicans see it as a must-pass bill. Can they hold together enough of their members to vote down these Democratic amendments around the ballroom? This is becoming a bit of a tricky issue here.
All right. Sahil, thank you so much.
Overseas in the UK, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer insists he's staying on the job as pressure grows for him to quit.
More than 70 lawmakers from Starmer's ruling Labour Party have publicly called for him to step down, as well as at least one member of his government. It comes after last week's local elections that were disastrous for his party, losing more than 1,000 local council seats. Well, a few hours ago, as Starmer met with his cabinet, Downing Street released a statement saying he would not be stepping down.
Back here in the U.S., more than 30 million people are waking up to, frost and freeze alerts.
Angie Lassman back in time just to give us that lovely news. Hey.
Cue the booze. I guess, guys. Here's the deal. We do have kind of a setup that's leaving us cooler than normal for a good chunk of the country. Basically, east of the Rockies, we're stuck in this unseasonably cool pattern for the start of May. West of the Rockies, a very different story. We've got this intense heat that is continuing to build, and we're really going to kind of keep this strong ridge of high pressure centered over that region. So that means the sunny, the hot, the dry conditions are all going to be in the picture for at least a little while longer. That also means that this area of low pressure, this Canadian low, is going to sit just to the north of us and leave us with, again, this same kind of trend here for the extended period. So here's what that means in terms of actual temperatures and records. We've got a whole slew of records that are potentially going to be broken by the time we get to the end of our work week. You can see Salt Lake City, Las Vegas, Albuquerque, Wichita, Kansas City, all included in those here as we get through at least the next couple of days. And here's why. We've got temperatures into the triple digits for Las Vegas, 104 on today, 106 for Phoenix today. We've got the high 90s from Amarillo to El Paso, even the 90s on tap in Denver tomorrow. We're really going to see this heat and dry conditions kind of leave us with the potential for high fire danger. This is not what you want to see this time of year, but something we're going to have to watch for either way. We look to the east, and that's where the chilly weather is going to hang on. It'll be kind of a cool and rainy pattern, at least through the next couple of days. You see some 60s out there, some 50s for Buffalo, still hanging on to the 70s today in Pittsburgh, but ending up into those mid-50s by Thursday. And we've got this kind of better setup that's going to happen here as we get late into the week and into this weekend. So it's not all bad news if you're looking for some warm weather for the east. We've got the chilly storm system that kind of works off to the east, guys, as we get through your Friday, and then we'll see warmer conditions building. That leaves us with a much better kind of pattern setup for the weekend, that spring weather that everybody is looking for across the east, not just the west. And hopefully we'll get a break for our friends out west as well.
Cool. The booze go away now.
Yes, exactly.
What a concept. The nice weather lines up with the weekend.
Yeah,
I
know. I deliver sometimes.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.